Hello, everyone. Good morning. Thank you so much for being here. It is a bright, sunny morning in the ocean state of Rhode Island. And this is the Meetup with MeLa podcast. And I have the pleasure today of having our state representative, Rhode Island state representative, Marcia Ranglin-Vassell. And I'm so excited to be able to introduce her to all of you. I've had the pleasure and honor of being able to talk to Representative Ranglin-Vassell prior to this recording, and I think you'll be as blown away as I am in terms of her energy, passion, dedication, and commitment to the state and the people that she's representing. So thank you so much, Representative Ranglin-Vassell, for being here this morning with us today.
Absolutely. Thank you
Thank you.
so much for inviting me.
Oh no, thank you to thank you for coming to meet up with MeLa. Again, as you know, we're actually nearing the end of March, which is our
Mhm.
Women's History Month, and certainly you are one of the amazing women that I was so fortunate to be able to feature during this month and just capture your energy and just to sort of check in and also see what's going on in your world and in the state, and also during times of, we know, last year and also coming into this year of obviously experiencing COVID and a lot with that. So we're certainly very happy to have you. I just want to be able to start with by doing a brief introduction based on your work, and just to give our viewers some background as well regarding who you are and what you stand for, and just the work that you're doing on a state level. That's so appreciated.
Thank you.
So as an introduction, um, Marcia Ranglin-Vassell is a progressive Democrat. She was first elected in November of 2016 and represents House District 5. Currently, she serves on the Environment and Natural Resources Committee. Marcia is one of the strongest voices and leading advocates for a $15 living wage, access to doulas, the fight to end gun violence, and the dismantling of school-to-prison pipeline. Her body of work is expansive and centers on the intersectionality of race, gender, education, and socioeconomic status. She believes strongly that everyone should have the access to the same opportunities in education and employment and overall quality of life, regardless of zip code. As someone who understands deeply the impact of poverty, she is unapologetic in her fight for the underserved and marginalized communities and populations. Marcia continues to advance and participate uncomfortable conversations about race relations, implicit bias, and microaggressions, as well as the trauma for Black and Brown people as a result of institutional racism and structural poverty. So we're going to be having some of those discussions today based on the work that's happening here on the state level, and what you're passionate about. And in addition to that, also some of the work that you can talk about even back home and where you originated from in Jamaica. So we're so excited to have you today. One thing prior to us starting that I do want to just key everyone into on the Meetup with MeLa page can be found on Facebook and Instagram, Meetup with MeLa. This episode and many more can also be found on the Meetup with MeLa YouTube channel. And I also have additional information that will scroll on the bottom of our page today, which has Representative Ranglin-Vassell's information, which is Facebook is Rhode Island State Representative Marcia Ranglin-Vassell, Twitter at mranglin-vassell, and Instagram at rep.marcia, spelled MARCIA for those that are listening and not watching today. So thank you so much, like I said, for being here. And please just get us started. How did you get into all of this? And, and just give us even some background as far as, what led you to this point in terms of being a state representative.
So thank you so much, Melissa, for having me. I am delighted to
Oh,
share
thank you.
this morning with you and just to talk a little about, my work in the General Assembly and, what brought me there. But
Yes.
I think even before I get into what brought me to the Rhode Island General Assembly. I think I just want to share with your viewers and your listeners a little background of who Marcia is.
That would be great. Yes.
So I grew up in poverty and in gun violence in a little town 11 miles out of the capital city of Kingston, Jamaica. And everyone in my neighborhood was poor. I grew up in a community that had a lot of love, though. My dad
Excuse me.
did not, God bless you.
Thank you.
My dad ran away from the country as a very young man, almost a boy, and came to Kingston. And so he did not have the opportunity to read or write. My mom was forced out of school in the 6th grade to become a domestic helper, to wash clothes. And so she did not get the opportunity to finish her schooling. And so that is what I grew up in. But consider this, my dad, and I love to share this story because it empowers me.
Yes.
And empowers your listeners and viewers. My father, who did not know how to read or write, started a preschool using a tarp and cinder blocks. He started a preschool in the front of our yard. So here is the 2-room house, not 2-bedroom bathrooms, just 2 rooms, with 1 full-size bed for mom and dad, and 1 for myself and my 8 siblings. And my dad started a preschool by day and church by night. So we always had education, we always had faith in God. My dad would, and I guess the question is, if he did not know how to read or write, how did he start a school?
Yes.
Oh, he did, because he was a visionary, right?
Yes. Yes.
And the Sister Fisher, God bless her, so she's gone on. She was a deaconess in the church. She was my first teacher. She taught me how to read and to write. But my dad, who did not know how to read or write, never went to school one day in his life. I can still see the X that he would write beside his name, and it was crooked because he really learned how to write a perfect X. He started a preschool and a church where all the kids in the community would come to school. But my dad would also pick up random strangers and he would bring them into our house and they would sleep on the floor because there was no room on the bed. There were already 9 kids on the bed. There was no room.
No room there. Yes, no room there.
On the bed. But they could stay in our house for as long as they wanted. Because one of the things that my father always said was that he has never met a stranger.
Yes.
Everybody that he met was a brother, a sister, a friend. He's never met a stranger. So I come from that. I come from poverty. I come from the ghetto. I come from faith. I come from hope. I come from determination. And that's so laced in my DNA. It is laced and strength that is laced in my DNA. So when I moved to Rhode Island in 1990, my mom and my sister were already here because my aunt, who my mom raised as a girl, sponsored mom to come to the US.
Okay.
And I came to the US later in 1990. When I came to the US, I was not able to get a teaching job in Providence Public School. I was not good enough to teach in Providence Public Schools because I was from an island. I was from Jamaica. You could not be that good. So I got a job at Hasbro Toy Factory, making Busy Bee toys, working on an assembly line, making Busy Bee toys. I should confess that I was not all that great making Busy Bee toys. I was not all that great houses cleaning. I worked for this, I got a job through the temp agency to work for an amazing woman. She was just amazing, but I was cleaning her house. I was washing her floor and scrubbing her toilet, washing her windows, and doing all the amazing work that so many women do today, and we do it
Yes.
well. So, how did I get from all of that? Is your question to this?
Yes. Yes.
I got into politics in Rhode Island not by design. No one would have picked me to run for House District 5 in Providence. No one would have picked a Black woman from Jamaica, a teacher. I started teaching by then, to run for office in Rhode Island. No one would have picked me, right? Just look at me. No one would have picked me. But I decided to run for office when a young man, Kip Stewart, God rest his soul, his mom sent hello to me just this week, and I sent hello back to her. He got shot and killed. He was a young dad and a wonderful young man.
Oh.
Lost his life to gun violence. And one of the twins, my two sons, one of them came home and says, "Mommy, they shot Kip."
Mm.
And I remember it like yesterday. He was in the chair in the living room, and I was sitting across from him. And he had tears just rolling down his eyes. And I remember that I didn't say anything to him as he was crying because I didn't know what to say.
Mm-hmm.
But in that moment of me watching him with the tears rolling down his eyes, I started thinking about all the students that I had lost teaching in the Bridge Alternative High School at the Urban League of Rhode Island and of Center for Hispanic Policy and Advocacy. I started thinking of all those children. The first boy that I lost, he got shot and killed
Mm.
a Thursday night. And when I went to school that Friday, I heard that Tyson was shot and killed. In that moment of my son just crying there, I started thinking of Tyson, a beautiful boy with the most amazing smile from Haiti. And he was shot and killed in South Providence. I started thinking of the last boy that I taught that was shot and killed. And I decided I'm running for office.
Mm.
Because I think that we could pass good common sense and safety laws. And that's what got me into office. Melissa, I remember knocking on doors one evening. And as I was knocking on door, I was on Lubeck, and a man and his wife was coming from Price Right, where they had just bought groceries, and they were taking the stuff from out of the trunk of their car. And I was telling them why I was running. I was running because I think we could pass good common sense gun safety laws. And they also told me that they could not get everything that they wanted at Price Right because they were both were working, but they could just not afford it. And I gave them my card and I said, "Please vote for me because I want to make sure that I pass good common sense gun safety laws." That was the only thing that I was thinking of when I started running.
Mm-hmm.
When I came home later that evening, I started, oh, I should tell you this. The gentleman says, "I'm glad you're running because I lost my son Todd to gun violence."
Oh.
And I gave them my card and I got home. And when I got home, I remember and I started journaling. I journal frequently. I start remembering that Todd was my student too.
Oh my gosh. I
And
mean, what are the chances? Mm, I'm so sorry.
I had lost Todd too. And over the years, and I think of Eric, who got shot and killed on the corner of Broad and Adelaide. I think of all those kids, and I said, I'm running for office. As I started thinking about all of this, I said, well, if this family could not, is working so hard and they cannot pick up every single thing that they need in the store, then I need to fight for a $15 living wage.
Mhm.
And I got my second priority because I just started with one.
Yes.
I have to fight for a $15 living wage because no one should work 40 hours. No one should work up to 80 hours. A man and his wife should not be coming from the store and not be able to buy all the things that they needed to buy,
Hmm.
even after they work so hard.
Yes.
So I started running on a $15 living wage because it just didn't make any sense that that people can't pay the bills and keep the roof over their heads, even though they work. And as I started thinking about it more and more, I said, wait, so all the kids that I am teaching in the Bridge Alternative School, which were mostly adjudicated boys,
Yes.
right? Could there be a connection between their family working 80 hours a week, not able to get all the things that they needed?
Hmm.
Could it be the fact that the family may be doing double time? So when their children got home from school,
Hmm.
mom and dad, or mom and mom, or whatever the combination is of parenting, is not there to help their children with homework.
Yes.
And are we having a lot of latchkey children? Could that then be the reason why I have so many children in my school that I was teaching at the time in the adjudicated? So I developed my third platform, which is to dismantle the school to prison pipeline, which sends children from my classroom straight into prison.
Yes.
So that is how I got into this thing, and every now and then I'm like, I don't even know why I'm there. And then the answer always come back. You're there for all those children.
Yes.
You're there for their families, and you're there for all the people that's not in the room. And you're there for the communities that have been shut out, have been marginalized, have been discredited. You bring their voice to the state house. So that's kind of how I got there. And getting there was not easy. Taking on the House Majority Leader, who had been in office for 24 years, who no one had run against him, and I dared to run against him because I knew the seat belonged to the people, and I knew that the position should work for the people, and it
Hmm.
not be working for fat cats and corporations. So that's kind of what brought me there.
I mean, it's such a powerful story and
Mhm.
narrative, and speaks so much of the compassion
Yeah.
that was emulated in your home growing up,
Yeah.
and the love that your parents had in terms of welcoming people into the home, the passion that your father had and the vision, and that certainly has transmitted and is so evident in you. And
Yeah.
I think that's such a beautiful thing. But when
Thank
we
you.
see that, I think it's so important, first off, for us to share our stories, because I think sometimes people can see possibly your Facebook page or where you are now and
Yeah.
don't realize that
Yeah.
backstory and the
Yeah.
work that goes into that and the struggle and the
Yeah.
tears and the passion and the
Yeah.
people that have been around you. And also when you enter these spheres of, especially in a state like Rhode Island, that in other states as well that have had long-term, politicians,
Mhm.
you are certainly going against something that is so nuanced in the sense of you coming in and being a woman that didn't necessarily grow up here,
Mhm. Mhm.
coming a lot of times people
Yeah.
perceive that as coming from the outside,
Yes.
not necessarily being bred to be a
Right.
politician,
Right.
right?
Right.
A woman of color,
Yeah.
coming from an immigrant family that's
Yeah.
hardworking. But
Yeah.
also, I think such the beauty in that that it goes to show that even though it's certainly not easy, and I'm sure
Yeah.
if anyone knows, and your family knows,
Yeah.
the fact that you had the passion to do
Yeah.
something about that and were able to do something about that. And I'm sure it's a culmination of your educational background, having that education, having the experiences with your
Yeah.
classmates, like I said, your
Yeah.
family, and just your heart
Yeah.
in that. And also, I think coming from a place of being a mom,
Yes.
I'm a mom, you're a
Yeah.
mom,
Yeah.
wanting different for our kids
Yes.
and wanting different for
Yes.
our grandkids and wanting different
Yeah.
for our neighbors and the communities that
Yeah.
we inhabit. But I think it's such a beautiful thing because I think sometimes we so look at what we considered an end product, and you're
Right.
so polished and beautiful and
Right.
educated
Right.
in your own right, but
Right.
realizing that comes from a lot of vulnerability too, and
It does. It
examination,
does.
and really just understanding
It does.
what systems are we fighting against day to day that we're not even, I think so many people aren't
Yeah.
even aware of because we've lived it, right? So
Mhm.
when you talk about certain things, and it makes me think of, the prison, the school to prison pipeline, as well
Mhm.
as not having a living wage. And obviously, we know there's some vast inequities that exist when you have two parents that are working and working and working for their kids, but then at
Mhm.
the same time, working, you're away from your kids,
Yes. Yes.
trying to just accomplish and trying
Yeah.
to live and trying to provide. I mean, there's so much to be said about
Mhm.
systemic racism and
Mhm.
structural poverty, that
Yes.
it's not as easy as work harder. Because I
Mhm.
think a lot of people think, oh, work harder. Well,
No.
can't you get a better job? Can't you work harder? How many more hours does someone need to put into the
Right.
workday?
Right.
How much more
Absolutely.
can somebody do? And then
Yes.
secondary to that is just working harder doesn't mean that that affords you a whole other lifestyle. And we've seen that so often. And then
Right.
the structural racism component
Mhm.
of that is realizing that
Mhm.
these systems are set up exactly to do what they're doing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, racism and systemic racism is laced in the very DNA of America,
Yes.
but we can dismantle it. Racism and systemic racism is laced into the very DNA of America. So, let us think of it this way. Black people are the only group of people that did not ask to go or to come to the Americas, which includes the Caribbean and the United States of America.
Yes.
Black people, we are the only people that did not ask anyone to bring us to work for free
Yes.
on cotton plantations and in sugar plantations. We were captured, abducted, and there was a lot of atrocities that
Mm.
happened to us in that space of time. We are talking about Black enslavement 400 plus 1 years of Black enslavement, of systemic racism, of an oppressive system being on our necks, which has culminated in sad and tragic incidences of George Floyd.
Yes. Yes.
When we speak of racism, when we speak of systemic racism, we're speaking of every single system that Black people interface with. It is oppressive. Every single system that we interact with, it is telling us you're not good enough.
Mm-hmm.
You're not smart enough. You're not deserving enough
Mm-hmm.
of a good education system. You are not worthy enough not to die just trying to have a baby.
Yes. Yes.
You are not worthy enough not to go to the highest level that you can go. You are just not good enough to have this job simply because of the color of your skin.
Mm-hmm.
Systemic racism is saying because of your unworthiness, you should be living in a community that doesn't have clean water or clean,
Yes.
that the water is poisoned with lead,
Mm-hmm.
which affects your brain
Mm-hmm.
and the baby. So that is systemic racism.
Mm-hmm.
But we cannot look at systemic racism without also calling out white privilege and what it is.
Yes.
White privilege to me, Melissa, is simply having access and having opportunities, not solely based on talent in many cases
Mm-hmm.
or by merit, but you're getting those because you of your whiteness, because of the color of your skin. You get to go to the best school. You get
Mm-hmm.
the best job. Your kids get the best job. You have access to conversations and power just because of the color of your skin. While a Black woman like me, doesn't matter how smart I am, or any Black and brown person, would be denied those same opportunities just because the color of your skin. And every time I say these things, I always make sure I say this. You don't have to blame yourself for being white.
No. No.
I am not blaming myself for being Black. I'm
Yes.
this Black woman. We don't have any say in the families that we were born into
No.
or the color of our skin. So do not fault yourself and do not be sorry and do not feel embarrassed or do not even feel so ashamed that you do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Use that privilege that you are given at birth. Use it to help create pathways and access for Black people and brown people that have been shut out for 401 years. Use your access, use your power to say, I am going to step back and I'm going to stand back and I'm going to push my sister or my brother forward. Let that Black woman or that Black man, that brown woman, indigenous woman, Let them have that seat at the table. And by the way, not just getting the seat at the table, but let them use the abilities, give them or let them. And I know they're empowered, but we have to not just be at the table, but we have to be able to use our gifts and our talents to
Mm-hmm.
lift our communities up. So it's got to be more than just a seat at the table.
Yes. Yes. It needs to,
And
yes, it needs to be a
and
voice.
it
Yes.
needs to be a voice. And if you do not want me to have a seat at your table, as someone said, I am bringing my own table and
Mm-hmm.
I'm bringing my own chair and I'm bringing my people with me too.
Yes. Yes. I certainly appreciate what you're saying because I do think there's a real struggle right now in the sense of as much as we're trying to figure this all out, and hopefully we're
Mhm.
trying to
Yeah.
dismantle this very broken system, that, like you said, has gone on for centuries at this point.
Yes.
We realize, and so often I've seen this with students that I've worked with as well,
Mhm.
and realizing again, it's like, how do we have these conversations in a way that
Mhm.
no one is walking away with shame of who
Right.
we are, where we come
Right.
from.
Right.
Someone's white, they should not be feeling bad about being white,
No.
just as much as we shouldn't be feeling bad
Right.
about being
Absolutely.
black and brown,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
just as much as someone shouldn't be feeling bad if they come from a place of socioeconomic privilege and
Right.
someone is coming from a place of poverty.
Mhm.
Again, we have no
No.
control of who we
No.
are as children who were born, or what the families, the places that we've lived. However, the difference is we do have the choice as adults and informed
Yes.
adults. And like
Yes.
I always say, when you know, now you know. You
Mm-hmm.
can't say you didn't know. And when
Right.
you know, you need to think of something you can do. And a lot of times, like you're saying,
Yes.
it doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't
Mhm.
have to be something where you're, on the lines and, there,
Yeah.
you don't
Yeah.
need, there's so much that you can do in the sense that it's realizing if there is someone
Mhm.
that you're feeling like you're saying, giving up
Mhm.
your seat or even being able to be inclusive in this process,
Mhm.
because we're
Mhm.
realizing, I think so many people come from a place of like, well, I have the seat because I deserve it, but you're not realizing someone else may have so much more experience than you.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
And the way we learn from each other is also hearing different
Right.
experiences and
Right.
ideals. And, there is a very healthy part of conflict and debate. But
Mhm.
at the same
Mhm.
time, if it's the same, if we wanted to see the same voice and the same person and the
Mhm.
same thing over and over again,
Mhm.
we are just continuing to work
Right.
on the same system and we're going to have
Right.
the same problem.
And I think also it's when you share that seat with me is what you're in actuality saying is we don't get to hear the stories of your people.
Hmm.
We don't get to hear the struggles of your people. We do not and I mean we meaning the power brokers that are usually at that table.
Yes.
And so when you bring more people and diverse voices, diverse ideas of people that have been shut out for generations and centuries, you are saying, I want to be a part of building this beloved community where
Yes.
everyone is valued. Everyone, regardless of your race, your socioeconomic status,
Hmm.
education, your class.
Hmm.
And what you are essentially saying, I am willing to become part of the solution of building this beloved community.
Yes.
Everyone feels valued, where everyone feels like they are contributing to this community, where
Yes.
no one is ostracized, where no one is felt less than
Hmm.
just by the color of their skin.
Yes. Yes.
where someone is not denied a job just because you think she's Jamaican and she may not be good enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
How about if we all learn to become vulnerable?
Mm-hmm.
How about if we start learning to take chances with the people that we don't know? How about if we start sharing each other's stories?
Mm-hmm.
Because in sharing each other's stories, we are going to realize that we have more in common.
Mm-hmm.
We have differences. In sharing our collective stories, we're going to realize that yes, there is a group of people that are Black that have been oppressed for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And just saying Black Lives Matter doesn't change their lives.
Mm-hmm.
Just
Yeah.
taking plantation off the state name doesn't change their lives,
Mm-hmm.
doesn't change my life, doesn't change my grandson's life, doesn't change all of the Black and brown and poor white people I like to include very often, who
Yes.
are marginalized as well, and who needs a voice. Right?
Yes. Yes.
So we have to ensure that while we're tossing out these words out there, equity, inclusion, diversity, because these words may sound like we're really woke, right?
Mm-hmm.
But to be woke really means that we're changing systems and we're changing policies
Policies. Yes. Yes.
that have disenfranchised generations of people. So if you're going to start using the word equity, then let us ensure that we're passing a $15 living wage.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
If we are using the word equity, let us ensure that we're making sure that the ventilation in schools in core urban areas are proper
Mm-hmm.
and kids are not getting sick based on the fact that they're living in communities that have toxins all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to talk about equity, we ought to ensure that we are not systemically and systematically suspending Black and brown children and giving them out of school suspensions when their pair gets in school suspension.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So it's all of that, right?
Yes.
Not just like, oh, we're using equity and diversity and our company or our status taking plantation off our state name and now we're only Rhode Island. No,
No.
it's not that easy. It takes intentional, robust investment in core urban areas. It takes deep investment in our small businesses.
Yes.
Full well that small businesses are going to employ more people than fat cats and corporations.
Mm-hmm.
It means that small businesses, the money that small business people, employers make, is going to be injected, it's going to be spent right there in the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
Means that we're going to reduce crime and unemployment. So saying these words, you've got to put some action with them.
Yes.
Gotta, from a policy standpoint, start creating policies because government should be working for people,
Mm-hmm.
not the other way around. And we have to center poor people. We have to center people that have been marginalized.
Yes.
We have to, there's a lot of conversation, and I'm so grateful that the president is put so much investment into cutting child poverty, right?
Yes.
But as I think about it, I think about if we could really pass the $15 living wage at the federal level, and we can invest in poor urban communities, that is really how we cut child poverty.
Yes. Yes.
Because these children live with families who are struggling.
Yes. Yes.
And so it needs a deep investment in families.
Yes.
Because once we start investing in our families, hello, we actually invest in children.
Yes.
So, it means that we have to start shifting the way we view policy and what we think policy is intended to do. And it's going to take a little bit, but we don't have time.
No, we don't.
We've been waiting for a long time. We have been waiting for generations. And so we need to dismantle these systems that keep generations oppressed and oppressed. And we do that by passing good progressive policies that centers people, poor people, Black people, brown people, marginalized people. And I think we can do it.
I think in addition to that too, and I so appreciate you sharing all of this in the sense that it helps us understand on a level of, again, it's not about just having the seat at the table and having that representative spot, because we have seen where, a lot of times Black, brown, marginalized groups, okay, we're going to allow certain amount of positions. However, again, that's just a lot of times optics. It's not because, I have a real struggle with that, because I think sometimes too, like, when we saw a lot of this come on with diversity inclusion directors and people, yes, oftentimes there's someone of color, but I will tell you that will be the least invested program. It's like a check mark, like, oh, we met our federal guidelines, right? It's not necessarily because you as an institution is invested in making these changes as an institution. You're invested in making sure that you don't get in trouble because you're not doing that. And that to me is it's also about, I think, as being a woman, a person of color, and also realizing we want genuine representation, genuine seats at the table. It needs to not be because I'm the last person that wants to be presented in an optic that's not real, because I think a lot of people get that. In addition to that, I know that you mentioned earlier, and I also, I think, read in your biography about access to doulas. And I think the big thing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, because I could be going the wrong direction, but we've realized that so often Black and brown people in marginalized groups, their pain is often not realized as being real. Their issues are not often realized as being real. Their reproductive health is not honored in the same way. And a way that it's also like, it doesn't really matter. If I have another kid, it doesn't really matter in the sense that I'm producing to more of a broken system versus a white counterpart of mine could have a child, and it's a very different event. It's a very different celebratory event. It's a very different experience in terms of the actual pregnancy, from the time of even prior probably to conception. But so also realizing, is your objective in terms of having the access to doulas help in terms of protecting groups that have experienced this systemic racism, as we know exists very much in the medical fields. I do have to say, I'm a faculty member at Brown for the medical school, and they've done an amazing job this past year in terms of really pushing those issues to the forefront in terms of medical disparities. So I don't know, what are some of your thoughts on that?
So, thank you so much for that question. You know, one of the great, amazing, wonderful thing about bringing different people into public spaces of power, like the Rhode Island General Assembly, is that we bring the stories of our neighbors,
Yes.
and we bring the stories of our children, and we bring the stories of our friends. And our story, like my story, is vastly different from most members of the General Assembly.
Yes.
Right now, there are 21 Black and Brown people in the General Assembly.
Okay.
To the Rhode Island House of Representatives, there were seven of us, seven, and then I became eight. It's important to bring people because we bring our lived experiences. To your question, Melissa, 25 years ago, I delivered two beautiful boys. I was working full time at the time. I had no medical issues. 5 days after the birth of my twins, I had a subarachnoid hemorrhage
Wow.
on the right parietal area of my brain. And I was hospitalized. I went from women and infants. That was 5 days after. I
Mm-hmm.
biggest headache of my life. Didn't know what it was at the time. But I remember calling my sister Pearline and I said, Pearline, you've got to take me back to women and infants. Because if you do not take me back today, you're not going to have me tomorrow.
Mm.
I remember saying that to her. And she drove over from Washington Park, Alabama Avenue, and she brought me to Women and Infants. Hindsight, I should have called the rescue. But not too long after being a woman, and I was shuttled over to Rhode Island, where
Mm-hmm.
I stayed for several days. My blood pressure had gone up so high that I had an aneurysm, preeclampsia,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't see my precious babies for over a week
Mm-hmm.
as I recovered from this subarachnoid hemorrhage. When I was well enough, I came home and I started looking at Black maternal health
Yes.
and what could have happened to me. Like, what could have happened to me that I could be so well and then all of a sudden I was not well anymore? And so I started really reading up about this thing and really looking at disparities and racism in the healthcare system. I started reading up and looking at it and looking at how women are treated in
Mm-hmm.
the system. So when I got elected, I said, wow, this is an opportunity for me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I could introduce a doula bill,
Yes.
and which I did. I believe 2018 was the first year I introduced a doula bill. When I introduced a doula bill, I remember going in the chamber, and I have my notes to prove, and talking to people and asking them if they knew about who doulas are.
I was going to ask if you could explain that. Yes, because not everyone does know what a doula is.
Most people in that chamber did never heard
No.
of doulas. In fact, the only people in the room at the General Assembly, in the House of Representatives, that I'm a member of who knew of doulas in 2018 were the white men who could afford doulas for their wives.
Yes.
They knew about doulas. So I started just talking about doulas, but let me just say this as well. There were women in Rhode Island doing the work of doulas before I started publicly talking about doulas.
Yes.
So I do not want for 1 minute to think that I was the first person who mentioned the word doulas in Rhode Island. There were women that were already doing that valuable and important work of doulas. But not many people in the public sphere knew about doulas.
Mm-hmm.
Although doulas have been around for centuries.
Yes. Yes.
Although they've been around for centuries. Doulas is about reproductive justice.
Mm-hmm.
It's about racial justice.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also about economic justice
Mm-hmm.
for Black women. The Centers for Disease Control data shows that Black women are dying 3 to 4 times more than their white counterparts. How sad.
In childbirth? Is that
In
in
childbirth.
childbirth? Yes.
From a birthing experience.
Yes, from a birthing. Yes, and like you said, it could be something that
Right.
is a delayed result of that experience.
Right.
Yes.
From a birthing experience. 3 to 4 times more than. There's nothing wrong. I remember a year ago, I was in a committee hearing presenting on doula, and one of the legislator, a white guy, said, "Rep, is there something wrong with the DNA of Black women?" I remember I did not answer that question because I didn't want to answer it. And the woman who testified right behind me, an amazing white woman. And that's why we need not just allies, but we need disruptors.
Yes.
We need accomplices in
Yes.
the justice. She went on right after me and she laid it straight. She said, "There's nothing wrong with the DNA of Black women. What is wrong is the racism that's laced in the system that Black women have to operate in."
Mm-hmm.
So 3 to 4 times more likely to die in a birthing experience. I don't have the exact percentage in front of me, but more Black women than you could imagine will have C-sections.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We
Mm-hmm.
realize that from data that is shown that when a doula is added to that relationship of this pregnant woman, that we see the C-section rates reduced.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I've been thinking a lot because I had C-section with my twins. I've been thinking a lot that I wonder, because C-section birth is so much more expensive
Mm-hmm.
than vaginal birth.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I wonder why so many Black women are getting C-section. That's a question, right?
Mm-hmm.
That I'm going to leave out there for all of us to contemplate. I will tell you that since I started this conversation with my first introduction in 2018 of the doula bell, this is how far we have come. Mayor Elorza have put money in his budget for doulas. And he called me, he says, "Rep, thank you so much for letting me know about doulas,
Mm-hmm.
the important work that doulas do." And I'll come to that just in 1 minute. The former governor, Gina Raimondo,
Mm-hmm.
put money a year ago in her budget for a line item for doulas, right? For the Medicaid portion of it. This new governor, McKee, has put $112,000 to cover doulas through Medicaid. Keep in mind, when we started, Not many people knew about doulas,
Yes.
but there is a concerted effort by a lot of doulas in Rhode Island, women who are actually doing the work to ensure that we save Black women's lives,
Yes.
brown women's life, through introducing doulas into these relationships. Sister Fire, doulas of Rhode Island. So many doulas that are out there doing the valuable work of providing not medical care, but culturally competent care.
Yes.
I see. Friendship, being that person. If you have a headache going on 2 to 3 days, it's so bad. I wonder if I had a doula. I'm sure the doula would have said, Marcia, you should go back to the hospital right away. And so doulas, although not medically trained, they are specialized, specially
Mm-hmm.
trained to provide advocacy, support, love, empathy, compassion.
Yes.
Tell you, a doula that looks like me would not underestimate the pain that I'm having,
No.
would not tell me that the threshold for my pain is more a white woman.
Yes.
After my mom passed away, I had to go to the hospital and I was treated so inhumanely, so badly. And I was just not getting proper care as I laid there on the bed um, with headaches and with everything going on. And at the end of me leaving, I remember saying to the nurse, because I said, I'm not going to leave. And this is like less than 5 months ago. I said to myself, I'm not going to leave without having this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And before I left, I said, Nurse, I want you to know that what I just experienced here is racism in this hospital, where I was so devalued that when I called, no one came. When I asked a question, my question was not answered in in a respectful manner. And before I left, I opened my phone and I gave her a website. And I said, I want you to read this website, Racism in Healthcare. And I
Mm-hmm.
want you to share this with your colleagues. The work of doulas is so valuable. It is so important in saving lives. I would have introduced the same bill in the General Assembly to cover Medicaid and also the private insurance piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
There is a population of women like myself, although I'm not having any more babies, but if I was, I would not be able to access Medicaid coverage.
Yes.
I would be covered under my private insurance. But private insurances don't want to pay for a doula services, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, and also a part of this bill that I am introducing, it says that we're asking for economic justice for these amazing doulas who are working so hard and is underpaid.
Yes.
So we're asking the state to come up and invest in these women.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to say this before I finish on this. Black women saved the democracy of the United States. We did. Black women delivered the Senate with Reverend Warnock
Yes.
and and Senator Ossoff.
Yes.
Black women did that.
Yeah.
So in this moment, where Black women actually showed up and saved the democracy, in this moment, the way you say thanks to Black women in Rhode Island is passing this doula bill.
Yes.
The way you say yes to Black women is passing a $15 living wage, which mostly Black and brown women are on the front line of this pandemic.
Yes. Yes.
The way you say, I am going to be a part of creating this beloved community where everyone feels valued, is you pass my bills that says you must value us because we're people and we are valued and we have a right to food and water. We have a right to safety.
Mhm.
We have a right to this creation just like you do. So this doula bill is so close to me. Every time I see my twins, every time I see my grandson, Elias, who looks just like his grandma, every time I get to hold him, I say, I almost didn't get to see this. This doula bill is for all the women who died
Yes.
and didn't get to see their babies, didn't get to hold their babies. This doula bill is for women like me who survived, but I will live with hypertension and taking medicine for the rest of my life. Because this bill, doula bill, is intended to address mortality and morbidity rates
Mhm.
that disproportionately impact Black women and brown women. This bill is personal to me
Mhm.
because I get to tell my story. Melissa, I get to sit with you today and to tell you about all the things that I'm trying to do, but it almost never happened. And for so many Black women and brown women, and in some cases, poor white women, it just didn't happen.
Mhm.
They didn't get to live. But I remember being on the fourth floor of Rhode Island Hospital. And I remember saying to God, God, I am not dying.
Mhm.
You gotta be kidding me, God. I've got things to do. I have got boys to raise. I am not dying, God. You gotta be kidding me. So I defied death. I defied death. And I remember I made a pact with God. And I said, God, on the fourth floor of Rhode Island Hospital, as I was clinging to life, I said, God, if you spare my life for my boys, there is absolutely nothing in this world that I wouldn't do for you.
Mhm.
Just say the word. And since he has healed me, since he has kept me, after that, one of the first things I did I started ministering in the homeless shelter
Mhm.
at 245 Prairie Avenue at the Urban League of Rhode Island. And when my boys were old enough, I would bring my 3 sons, I would bring my stepdaughter, and I would bring my niece to the homeless shelter. And we would serve food. And in some cases, I would have to cook food as well.
Mhm.
And we would serve the food, and I would minister the gospel because I'm a minister too. And the work that I do for justice is my ministry. I do it because God has kept his promise to me
Mhm.
that I get to see my grandson and I get to see my sons and I get to keep my promise to him
Mhm.
by fighting for $15 living wage, by fighting for access to doulas, by fighting to dismantle the school to prison pipeline, by fighting to ensure that every school in Rhode Island have access to high-speed internet, by
Yes.
ensure that we end lunch shaming, by
Yes.
to ensure that every person in this beloved community is valued. I am fighting to make sure that my neighbors and myself were able to walk in a community that's rid of gun violence, where we can be safe. But it has come at a price. The price is heavy at times. The price is burdensome at times. Because, see, not everyone wants to create a community where everyone is valued.
No.
And so there are times when the oppressors have tried to silence my voice, but they can't because they could not silence me because of where I come from.
Mhm.
And they could not even silence the voices of my ancestors because I am sharing those stories. And so my ancestors are living through me. And we're continuing that fight. And we're making incremental changes. I don't do this work alone. I stand on the shoulders of giants and of women and of people who have bled and died and people that are still fighting. And I'm
Mhm.
so grateful that my neighbors elected me not once, but twice to represent our shared values in the Rhode Island General Assembly. And as long as they want me to, I will continue to do that. And even if I don't do that here, there's always a vineyard somewhere that I will continue to do this work.
No,
That
and
is sometimes when I share these stories, they are painful.
mhm.
They are painful, but they also releases toxins from my body. So thank you for giving me this space.
Oh no, thank you. And I think again it gives so much insight to your journey and the journeys of so many that make this work pivotal and important, integral to the life we want to live and and what we want to leave for generations to come, and continuing to make this a safe environment and a progressive
Yeah.
environment and an environment where everyone should have basic rights
Yeah.
and access.
Yes.
So I certainly appreciate that. I do want to share with everyone two very important websites as well. Which one of these is obviously to volunteer or to donate to your reelection, which would be in
Yes.
2022. But
Yes.
obviously, we know it's an ongoing process.
Yeah.
Anyone can visit the website at www.marcia4ri.com. www.marciaforri.com. And in conjunction with that, also, you did share your email for your constituents
Yeah.
as your representative of the
Mhm.
House District 5, which is
Mhm.
the Charles, Wanscott, and Elmhurst area. You're a
Mhm.
progressive Democrat, as we had spoke about earlier. And the email for anyone to reach out to you that are in these areas and
Yes.
want to maybe convey any
Mhm.
of the questions or concerns or what they're dealing with or
Mhm.
what's personal to them
Yes.
is rep hyphen Ranglin hyphen Vassell at rilegislature.gov. That is
Correct.
REP hyphen RANGLIN hyphen VASSELL at RILEGISLATURE.gov. So again, those important, very important sites, because I know as you're speaking about so many things, I don't see that there's any of these issues that someone can't relate to. I mean,
Right.
we all know
Mhm.
someone that's working for minimum
Yes.
wage. We all know
Yes.
someone that's not able to make the bills. We all know
Yes.
somebody that has encountered issues during, whether it's during the birthing process or thereafter or during
Yes.
the pregnancy. So the issues that you're talking about is as we do talk about the major discrepancies that are felt with our people in poverty and our Black
Mhm.
and Brown communities, again, they are issues that affect us all because
Absolutely.
again, we're seeing disproportionately Black and
Mhm.
Brown people are on the front lines,
Mhm.
especially that's been highlighted during this pandemic,
Yes.
in terms of frontline workers. If we don't have our frontline workers, if we don't have systems of people that are able to
Right.
continue to support, even if you want to look at it from just the economic and financial sense,
Right.
Black and brown people are the people in your communities that are working hard, that are
Yes.
actually making up a good part of, the economic growth and
Yeah.
development and what we
Mhm.
see on a daily basis. And I think people need to realize that that is very important that we all have a livelihood and are
Right.
able to realize some of the things that should be very basic human rights, like a roof over your head,
Right.
drinking water,
Yes.
also food on the table when you are
Absolutely.
working and everything, and really
Yes.
realizing for all of us, we've all gone through different
Oh
struggles.
my
I know
God.
sometimes
Yes.
people look and say, oh, well, that's never been the case. I've never been on public assistance, or I've never had to deal with this. Well, then count your blessings.
Count your
I always say
blessings.
that
Yes.
is such a place of privilege. If you don't know what it is for someone to have to count,
Right.
paycheck to paycheck, count your
Right.
blessings. That is from a place of privilege. And I
Yeah.
pray and hope that you'll never have to see that. But that is
Mhm.
not for the vast majority of Rhode
No.
Islanders,
No.
Americans, and we all need to be helping in terms of trying to take care of our neighbors where and when we can, because again,
Yeah.
we know things can turn very quickly.
Yeah.
2020 has showed us that quite a
Absolutely.
bit.
And
And I certainly appreciate you highlighting this. The other thing I want to highlight as well,
mhm.
before we even talk about some of your most important work that you've continued, even though you're in the state of Rhode Island and have certainly embraced this as your home and
Yeah.
obviously your community, we also realize you have still your heart is in your community of
Yes.
Jamaica. But I also wanted
Yeah.
to just feature some of the pictures that you shared with us as well. And if you could just sort of speak to some of these,
Yeah. Mhm.
that would be great. And then I'd like to shift gears in terms of talking about some of the work that you continue to do
Thank you.
in Jamaica. So no, thank you. Thank you. Um, so here's this picture here, and it looks like you're holding a book that says "No Child Should Grow Up Hungry." Um,
Yes.
and can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, that came out of in 2016. I got a call from not 2016. It could have been 20. It's my first year in the General Assembly. I got a call from someone, a family in Barrington, Rhode Island, who told me that their child was denied a hot lunch in school.
Mm-hmm.
And it really angered me as someone who grew up very poor.
Mm-hmm.
Mom and dad always made sure that we had our food.
Mm-hmm.
Feeding 9 kids is not easy. So, food insecurity, it's not that you don't have food, it's that it's the frequency, it's the accessibility,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also the nutritional value of food.
Yes.
So that is what food insecurity is. And for any kid anywhere in the world to be shamed because they don't have food or that lunch money to pay for a hot lunch is just a travesty.
Yes.
It's an injustice and it shouldn't happen, and I'm going to fight it.
Yes.
Know what it is to go to bed with feeling hungry.
Mm.
And in that one other dumpling in my plate, and I couldn't get the extra dumpling.
Mm-hmm.
So the former governor and her husband, the first gentleman, Andy Moffat, he had actually invited me because he was part of this No Child Hungry, which is a national organization really advancing the issue of equity in terms of feeding children. And so that is actually in the governor's office in Rhode Island. And I was holding that up. And I have a bill. I have a bill that states every child who shows up in the school cafeteria is
Yes.
entitled to a hot nutritional lunch,
Yes.
not an alternative lunch that's going to shame the child and allow the child to like saunter in the hallway or not go to the cafeteria. We're talking about access and equity in lunch. And one of my long-term goals is not just to pass this bill that's been sitting for years now in the General Assembly, but once we get the bill passed, is to make sure the food that our children are having in our schools are culturally appropriate.
Yes. Yes. That makes perfect sense.
Because food and the act of eating with people when we can after COVID, it's a social activity that we
Yes.
find our food and laugh,
Yes.
eat it, and. And so I want to eat food that I know, and I want to become vulnerable at times and try something else.
Yes.
For the most part, I want to be eating ackee and saltfish, right?
Yes.
Eating like food from my country.
Mm-hmm.
And and please don't say I should go back to my country to eat that. I want to eat it here.
Well, and just as much as I think, often it's so interesting that you're saying that, because I think when we see some of the staples, that's supposed to be inclusive of everyone, right? So,
Yeah,
but that's not. And I think people realize, well, that's what I eat. Well, yeah, but you have to also realize that's not what everyone else eats. So it's great
right,
that that's been catered around you. But I
right,
also know many cultures that even eating something cold is not
right,
necessarily the norm. It's a
right,
hot meal is what constitutes a meal. And
right.
I think also honoring and
Yes,
appreciating that, because the other thing that's so important too is we realize, and I think has been a huge thing, obviously, as you know as well, with COVID, so many of our kids were depending on breakfast and or lunch in
right,
school.
right,
And when kids stopped going to school, we realized obviously food and being able to function is so pivotal in terms
right.
of their physical growth, but then also the fact of how can we even learn when your brain is not being fed?
That's it. That's
And
it.
and then you realize the
Hmm.
longer that goes on, we
Hmm.
start to see the huge um differences in terms
Yes,
of
but it's
tracks.
yes.
And that's not, and like you said, that's not the child's fault, and most often it's not the parents' fault.
No,
Nobody,
No,
Nobody, I don't see anyone as a parent that would say, I want my child, to not have,
no, no,
food or not
no,
have.
no parent.
And I think that's the thing. We have to realize food being such a basic thing, we know how much food goes to waste on a regular
Right,
basis. We
right,
know how much we're willing to waste on things that really don't matter, too. I mean,
right.
if I see, and I hate to say it, one more luxury apartment go up,
Oh my
I'm gonna
God.
pull my hair out because
Oh my
it's like
God.
some of the things that we're willing to invest in, and it would be peanuts of what we'd invest in our children for
And
food.
food being a basic human right. It's a basic human right. I remember getting in
Yes,
trouble with another elected official who I posted that we should be feeding our children. And this person said, well, government is not children's parents, you know? And I say, I am going to push this forward.
yes. Thank
Every
you.
child deserves food. And
Yes.
one of the things that I have been doing as well, we're getting ready to open up a store, a food pantry in one
Okay.
school. We have all the stuff there already, thousands of dollars worth of groceries that an amazing woman, her name is Joy, who saw that I wrote on Facebook that I'm collecting these things. And she has been working with her partners, and also I want to also send a shout out to Jennifer, a woman as well, from Moms Demand Action Against gun violence, and they've been helping me to collect foods and gift cards for families, um,
Yes.
so that we can start this in our school. Because something that I realized that is that while our children will have the hot lunch at school for the most case, we are not catering to when they go home in the evening,
Yes.
when mom and dad, or mom and mom, or sister, or the caregiver is out working and may not be there to provide a meal for them.
Yes.
Also, not factoring the weekends.
No, or breaks or summer
No.
vacations or
So
yeah.
no, so that is where we're seeing a lot of the hunger in children.
Yes.
And so my big thing is, as a teacher in the city, and as a teacher who have been teaching for a while, knowing the connection between food and learning. Like if you're
Yes.
hungry, you cannot think.
No.
Maslow hierarchy of needs.
Yes. Yes.
Physiological needs must be met. Maslow before Bloom, right? We've got to
Yes.
think of these things, but not just in a casual way, or a way just to have conversations, which when it becomes just mere rhetoric, but in policy decisions. Like we have to change policies.
Yes.
So the policies that I have put forth and will continue to do are policies that centers children and their families.
Yes. Thank you so much because
Oh God.
that is just such a huge thing that, once again, if you're not familiar with it, and some of us are removed just by the fact of we don't have kids in school, or we're not we're not witnessing that, or we're not educators in the school system. And I think the thing about it is this is something that in this day and age, no one should have to experience. And like we said, a child should never be shamed for that experience
No,
either.
no, no,
And
no.
this should just be something basic. It's
Mhm.
something that should be easy enough for us to do.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
it's obviously something very essential. The
Absolutely.
next picture I'd like to showcase here, if you could tell us a little bit about that, that would be great.
Oh, this picture is this was 2016.
Okay.
September 13, 2016, when I defied the odds. I went to vote along with my three sons. They're there.
Yes,
And we voted. They were voting for their mom the very first time.
that's so exciting.
And I was voting for myself the very first time. And that was when I won my election by 17 votes.
Oh,
And
yes,
the recount, and I got 4 more votes. And
that's amazing.
And I won the election in November, then became like a three-way race with over 60% of the vote.
That's
I,
amazing.
that is that picture. That was when I dared the status quo,
Yes.
dared the pundit. And I said, I am going to run. I'm going to run for my students. I am going to run for my families. And if I run, you bet I'm winning.
Yes.
You
Yes.
bet
There's
I'm
no
winning.
stopping you now.
I don't
There's
have
no
time for
stopping you
that.
now. They say one of the biggest things is do not get in front of a determined woman. And that
No,
is so
no,
evident and so true in this situation. It's like,
no, no.
woman is that's determined to do anything, get out of her way because you're just going to get plowed down in the process.
Oh my God. Oh my God. It came with a lot of knocking on doors,
Yes.
a lot of people who, quite frankly, there were so many people who knocked on doors for me who were knocking doors for the very first time.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
and it came with people saying, we are tired of the status quo.
Yes.
We want someone who will represent our values. That was what my neighbors in the district said. And
Yes.
you know, I love you. You know, I say thanks. I do not take this position for granted. And I'm so grateful every day that I get to serve.
Yes. And here's one other here in terms of it looks like this is on a picket line when Stop and Shop went on strike. The
Yeah.
employees went on strike.
I believe in fair wages and
Yes.
equal wages. And if there's a picket line, I'm going to be there. I am going to be there because I stand for workers. I stand with unions. And in this space, also, I want to, as we talk about pay and pay equity, I still want to say that Black women are still getting 61 cents
Yes.
dollar that a white male makes.
Yes.
Fix that too. So,
Hmm.
but that was me on the picket line. I've been to this picket line. I've been to Bannister House. I have just and it's all about workers.
Yes.
And especially at a time where our unions are being shredded, you know? Union protect workers. And so standing with those workers that Saturday morning,
Hmm.
I would do it over and over and over again.
Hmm.
What I signed up to do, I've been doing this fight since I was 15 years old.
Hmm.
Started fighting for justice before anyone in Rhode Island knew my name.
Hmm.
I started fighting for justice when I was 15 years old, when we had no water, before anyone in Rhode Island knew my name.
Hmm.
And so I will continue this fight for workers, standing up and saying we cannot exploit workers
Yes.
because,
Yes.
and especially during this pandemic,
Yes. Yes.
Black and brown people have faced the brunt
Hmm.
of this. And by the way, let me just hasten to say what the world is knowing now, what Americans who have had the privilege of not knowing what it is to struggle, Black and brown people, what COVID has brought out is what we have been living for generations. So now that you all know what we've been going through, I hope we can advance policies that
Yes.
change, radically change the trajectory of people's lives.
Yes. And no, I certainly, yes, I certainly couldn't agree with you more in terms of this may have been an opportunity for COVID, as much as it's something none of us would have
Mm-hmm.
wished for.
Mm-hmm.
We have to try to see the silver lining and see,
Mm-hmm.
were there experiences that or topics that have been brought to the forefront that unfortunately were other people's daily realities, and how uncomfortable that's been for us in a relatively short period of time
Right.
that other
Right.
people have experienced, and that's
Right.
their norm.
Right.
So yes, to understand that, I think
Mm-hmm.
you give that some good perspective,
Mm-hmm.
because where people are saying, well, it's well within my right to do this, that, or the other thing. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
you've got to realize that's very interesting that you've had those rights and those
Yeah.
choices all
Yeah.
along, where some
Yeah.
people have never felt that they
Right.
had any choices.
Right.
And also, even doing everything right, have
Mm-hmm.
not even been able to actualize what it is to
Right.
be completely free
Absolutely.
and
Yes.
unoppressed in systems and communities that they've worked and dedicated time, money,
Mm-hmm.
resources, their lives to, and not feeling
Mm-hmm.
protected, honored, and
Absolutely.
respected.
Mm-hmm.
So I do want to do this in terms of talk about some of your work in terms of the support that you do in Jamaica.
Thank you.
I think one of the biggest things too is, in addition to that, also wanting to kick off with this picture that I believe you're in Jamaica at the time.
Yes.
So if you
Yeah.
could even talk about this, I think this is also amazing that, again, I think it's about understanding that you've certainly made this, and obviously you don't have to prove yourself by any means, but
Mm-hmm.
your community here in Rhode Island and how invested you are in that community, and obviously
Mm-hmm.
that speaks to your family and raising your
Mm-hmm.
sons here, and obviously living your life here and the work that you're doing, but then also still having that passion and
Mm-hmm.
care and empathy and drive and
Yeah.
persistence for where you also came from and your
Yeah.
roots in Jamaica.
My community cradled me. My community, riddled with gun violence, riddled with poverty, but had so much love and faith. And my home and my parents cradled me that I can be speaking to you this morning. I don't take it for granted. When you get an opportunity to leave, you do not forget your little brothers and sisters. You do not forget the little old ladies who you would sit on the ground and they would plait your hair.
Yes.
You don't do that. It's not in my DNA. It's not in my family's DNA. My entire family goes back to Jamaica and do this work. My siblings and I. And mommy, the last time we were there was 2 years ago because we couldn't go last year. Mommy was right there too, helping.
Wow.
Mommy comes with us every year to do these 2-week programs. I started doing this program about 26 years ago, going back to my community. When I got here, I remember buying a lot of clothes and a lot of shoes and a lot of pocketbooks and a lot of hats and
Yep.
I was buying everything. I bought even dolls because I didn't have dolls. My parents couldn't afford dolls.
Mhm.
So everything that I thought I was denied when I got here, I bought.
Yes. Yes.
And I thought it would make me feel like I'd arrived.
Yes.
It didn't. I remember having a yard sale and selling off a lot of things. And so things doesn't matter to me. Like this that I'm wearing is not mine.
Hmm.
I borrowed it from my sister. And I started saying to my friends, do not give me birthday gifts. I don't want anything for my birthday. Don't buy me another pocketbook. Don't buy me another scarf. I love scarves. Don't buy me anything. Donate to my birthday fundraiser every year
Hmm.
for the last 26 years.
Wow.
Last year for my birthday, I raised $1,500. And I need to say this because it's important. And that $1,500 was spent for my students right here in the district. Every
Wow. That's amazing.
all my friends, donated. And with the $1,500, every student that I teach on my caseload, special education caseload, receive a $25 gift card and a gift bag
Wow.
that
That's amazing.
my husband and I drove around all over Providence and we gave those bags. All those pictures are I have those pictures. I gave that to kids in my district.
They must have been so happy
Oh, they were so surprised.
and surprised. I was going to say.
I remember calling this boy and said, I am coming over to your house right now. And he says, you can't even come because you don't know where I live.
Oh,
I
yeah.
know where you live, but I have something for you too. So I did that for my kids here in my neighborhood. But I also do the same thing for kids in Jamaica. So we run a 2-week summer enrichment program. I ask my friends and my families to bring books and school supplies.
Yes.
So they come, and my husband, we have a cookout in the backyard, and they're eating Jamaican food, and they're playing. We're playing reggae music, and people are having a good time while we're collecting books and school supplies for kids in Jamaica. Last year, because of the pandemic, we were not able to go, but I made sure through the generosity of my neighbors, my friends, and my church, Ebenezer Baptist Church, we were able every year last year we sent $800 to Jamaica.
Wow.
The summer lunch program.
Yes.
Last year we fed over 350 kids hot lunches in Jamaica. Right now,
Wow.
I speak to you, I am partnering with the Jamaica Association of Rhode Island, which my brother Desmond is, he's the president of that organization. And we are collecting Chromebooks and tablets to give to the children in Jamaica who don't have any. Because my community is still poor.
Hmm.
And so I can't leave those little kids behind
No.
because I see in them doctors and lawyers and politicians and authors, right? And so when I see these little kids, I see me. When I stand in my classroom here in Providence and I teach my students, I'm looking at me and I'm saying, wow, I can't wait.
Yes.
I can't wait to see that. I can't wait to see the caterpillar becoming that beautiful butterfly.
Yes.
I can't wait. So my work in Jamaica spans 2 decades. It spanned my siblings and I recruiting doctors from all over the globe to run a free clinic in our neighborhood 1 week where people don't have access to healthcare.
Hmm.
So we keep doing these things and we do it because we don't know what to do else.
Hmm.
If we weren't doing these things, what else would we be doing? If we were not caring, what else would we be doing?
Hmm.
Even if we try to stop, we can't because it's in our DNA.
Yes.
Earlier, my parents, they would bring random strangers in and feed them. My dad would literally take the clothes off his back and give to a stranger. So my work in Jamaica continues. And so the work that I am doing here in the district and in Rhode Island really mirrors what I've been doing for the last 26 years. So
Mm.
I've had a lot of experience advocating
Yes.
and supporting. And it's something that I plan to do as long as I live. But more importantly, the same kind of legacy that my dad left for me and my 8 siblings, and now my grandchildren and my children, it's the same kind of legacy that I want to leave for generations to come.
Yes. Yes. And it sounds like you've made certainly an amazing push and start, and you've just been so influential. And I think especially even being on here today, which I so appreciate, and spreading the word and your mission and vision. And it's so empowering to see what are some opportunities where we can do the same.
Yes.
And I certainly appreciate that. I also want to showcase this picture. It looks like you're twins, which I
Yes.
know they've certainly, I'm sure, family and friends, and especially your sons, certainly act as such an inspiration for you and the work that you do and continue
Yeah.
to do. And now your grandsons, and I mean, it's such a beautiful process. And I think, again, to see that passed on and past, present, future,
Mhm.
is such a beautiful thing. And it's certainly, I mean, I'm just so astounded with your story and everything that you
Thank you.
are doing, have done, and I know will
Thank
continue to
you.
do.
Thank
So this is
you.
a great picture. And especially,
Yes.
oh, as moms, when we have these babies, and now it's like, whoa, they're a lot
Oh,
taller than us, right?
and these two, let me tell you, and there's a third one, Van, the older one, but these two, this is where that doula idea comes from.
Yes, exactly.
When I see these two boys that I gave birth to, that I made a pact with God. God, you got to be kidding me. I'm not dying. I got these boys to raise.
Yes.
And when I see my sons that are so beautiful, my 3 sons, and are so strong and so caring and so empathetic
Mhm.
and so compassionate to others, I see a legacy of kindness that I want to continue. And in this space of just talking about my sons,
Mhm.
when I see Terrence going out on his own after college and saying, Mommy, I want to start a company
Mhm.
that centers people. He talks, I'd love for you to talk to him. He talks about beloved community,
Yes.
company, embraces. When I see my son trying to sell his stuff, his clothing through World Dreams, and there are 2 boys walking on my street trying to get to do clean the snow a year ago. There was no snow. And they said they're doing it because they need to get money to buy clothes. And I see my son Terrence flying in the house, coming out with 2 bags of clothes, brand new stuff that he
Wow.
sold, and just gave it to these boys. I say, I think I did all right.
Yes. And like you said, it's certainly in the DNA.
I
And
think I did all
that
right.
is obviously very evident, and amazing, and just goes to show, I mean, such a tribute to, I think, for from our ancestors, where we've come from,
Mhm.
and also realizing in such great oppression and pain that
Yeah.
something so beautiful can come out of all of it.
Yes.
And
Yes.
such an honoring tribute in terms of, both of your parents. I again want to express my deepest condolences, as I
Thank
know
you.
you've lost your mom
Thank you.
within the last year, and that
Yeah.
was she
Five
was
months.
such, yes,
Five
such a
months.
partner to you and confidant, and I'm sure
Yes.
um
Senior advisor to me.
mentor, yes, advisor, and mom overall,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and again, as you mentioned, the loss of
Yeah.
your dad, I think it
Yeah.
just is so evident that
Yeah.
these traditions and that you've established as family, it's beautiful that this is,
Thank you.
you know, that this is what your sons have seen and obviously are
Yeah.
able to exhibit, but then
Yeah.
also that that should be the continuation with your
Yeah.
grandsons and thereafter. And that's such a beautiful
Thank
thing because a lot of people, that's not their reality nor story in terms of,
you.
so I certainly appreciate that. And then one of the things, the last thing that I actually wanted to bring your way, and I think again is just such a
Yeah.
testament of who you are and everything you're doing,
Thank you.
is Journeys, which is a book that you wrote, an anthology,
Yeah.
which is a literary collection of
Yeah.
poems and that you've collected throughout the years. And if you could speak to that. Also, I do also have I was able to find online this picture of
Yeah. There
actually
it is. Journeys.
Journeys, the book, a collection of poems about life, love, faith, and determination, by the wonderful Marcia Ranglin-Vassell.
Yeah.
So I certainly appreciate that. And can you tell us a little bit about how this came to be, and why was this something that you wanted to do and put together? And also, if we can hear any of anything about that or any of the
Yeah.
excerpts, I'd certainly appreciate that as well.
So, wow. Journeys with my butterfly, right?
Yes. And I love butterflies. Butterflies are so near and dear to me. So it's so
Oh,
funny when we've messaged and you've had butterflies. And then when I saw this, I was like, oh, it's so meant to be. It's so meant to be on so many fronts. And again, like you said earlier, it's that complete metamorphosis, right?
right.
It's like the
Mhm.
representation is just so
Right.
rich and
Yeah.
beautiful and means new and life and just
Yes.
the ultimate change. So, and process.
Well, I started writing. I remember I started writing when I was about 14 years old.
Okay.
Started writing, I want to believe it was right around when my grand uncle, who was a cop, was shot and killed. I was 14 years old.
I'm
And
so sorry.
yeah, I'm a born again Christian. And I was a young Christian and very devout Christian as well. But I had a lot of conflicts with God. I am always like having conflicts with God because I'm like, God, I don't get this. I don't get how a loving God could allow so much poverty and gun violence and me losing people that I love. And that was a time when you didn't talk too much, was kind of like kids must be seen and not heard. Right?
Yes.
But I had a lot of questions. And so I started writing to release a lot of the toxins from my young body. Because things that I didn't understand, I would write about. Things that I found confusing, I would write about. Things that gave me pleasure, I would write about. So I wrote over the years like hundreds of poems. And in this book, Journey
Wow.
poem,
You
yeah,
found the time. You found some extra time in your
in
schedule.
Jamaica, right? In this
Yes.
book, there's a poem. It's written by Terrence, one of my sons.
Oh, wow.
It's called "I Mourn for the Poems I Lost." Because I was
Wow.
telling him about, I said, Terrence, I've written so many poems over the years, but they were community poems because people in the community would borrow the poems and they would say them at concerts, and I've lost them. And I only remember some of the poems like when I go back home and a friend would say, Marcia, or Mar, what happened to repatriation? Or what happened to Mr. Big Man? In fact, one of the poems in there, Mr. Big Man, I didn't remember it at all until one of my neighbors, Norman, we all call Psyche, just saw me one morning. He says, Ma, remember this poem that you wrote, Mr. Big Man? And he just started saying it.
Wow.
And
one of your biggest fans.
Yeah. So fast forward to me coming here and going through a lot. And I wrote one book first. It's called Chasing Butterflies. It's a book with just quotations and some of these poems as well. But in 2012, I decided to, you know what? I am going to, Mom is an avid reader.
Yes.
I am going to publish this book and honor Mommy. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote the book, and I have read several of these poems to Mom, and she has read them as well. And I should say these poems are real. They're life experiences. They are, every single poem connects to my life. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing about this poem, this book of poems, is this friend of mine, Lisa, called me up, and Lisa and I have nothing in common in terms of how we were raised, what we look like, what we sound like, except that we love each other and we're friends.
Yes.
We have that in common. And she bought a copy of the book, and she called me and she says, oh my God, I could just own these poems. They're mine.
You're like, what? Yeah.
And I said, well, you can own them, Lisa. And we laughed about it a little. And she said, I'm reading this poem and I just see this rebel girl in this book, But some of the poems go across cultures as well.
Yes.
Across race. Because remember I said earlier that we have more in common than we have differences?
Yes.
Right? And yes, my story that I am telling you is unique to me and how I use my voice and what I do with my lived experience, but I am not unique in any way. There are so many women who are sharing and living my story, but they don't always have a platform.
Yes, that's true. That's very true.
I try to use my platform to share other women's story. So thank you for having me on.
Thank you.
Read this poem that I have. It's called, and it's from my book Journeys, and it's called, let's see, a poem for every Black woman.
That's perfect, especially this in terms of the conversation, excuse me, but also the month of March being Women's History Month and realizing and celebrating the accomplishments of women. I think that is definitely amazing. So great pick.
So I have an end note for this. I'll just read it.
Yes.
Poem is written in response to this poem is written in response to the deliberate effort by the status quo and those in power to silence the voices of Black women. They are afraid of the truth, and they find different ways and different means to try to silence our voices. In every instance, they have failed. So this is it. Nanny of the Maroons is to Jamaicans what Harriet Tubman is to African Americans. I'm no nanny of the Maroons or Harriet Tubman. Not even close. I'm simply a Black woman owning my space in a world filled with racism, sexism, bigotry, misogyny. Coexisting in a space where there is war to silence the voice of Black women. One of these days, you'll hear my story, her story, our story, all of it. From Genesis to Revelation, from A to Z. We will shout it from the mountaintop, the hope, courage, determination that's laced in our veins. One of these days, you'll hear my story, her story, our story of fighting back, of never giving in. Our lives have not been easy, traversing the Atlantic or oceans, land, and seas. Cotton gins, sugarcane mills, the oppressors have tried and failed. They will never be able to take our dignity. Lands, yes. Resources, yes. But they will never break the spirit of the Black woman, the Ashanti woman, the Asante woman. In chains, we fought back, channeling the authentic powers of women warriors. Yes, women warriors like Yaya Asantawa, like Lillian Mignet, like Ellen Euphemia Spencer, and yes, like my personal hero, Mavis, the Ranglin warrior. Today, we call on the powers of Nanny of the Maroons, of Harriet Tubman, and every Black woman who have lived, who have fought, who have died. There's no retreat for us. Our lives depend on it. We know how to fight. We know how to win. Our ancestors have done it. We, Melissa, you and I, we are doing it. We are.
You're like moving me to tears over here. Yeah, no,
We,
you're doing it. You're certainly doing it.
we are the indomitable Black woman. Black woman. Black woman. We are Black women.
That was beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. You are such a complete powerhouse in every sense of the word, in the sense of just the creativity and beauty and passion and service. I just, I'm certainly sending you nothing but virtual hugs and positivity and love and light your way.
Thank
And
you.
anything that you do and set your mind to, I know will never be short of amazing. Although not easy, never
Thank
short of
you.
amazing. And I certainly appreciate beyond measure in terms of you being on the podcast. This is obviously the first time that, I mean, I've certainly, like I said, appreciated you from afar and on Facebook,
Thank
but
you.
just feel such a connection and such an honor and privilege to have this experience with you today, and I'm so happy that it is documented in this moment in this podcast, and I so appreciate that. And but lastly, I just have one question to ask you, and I know I certainly appreciate your time. And um, what would be the one piece of advice that you have for women, women of color, people that are experiencing poverty, adversity, marginalization,
Mhm.
oppression, girls that are seeing this that are going to be strong and want to be women and want to be strong women
Yeah.
that are contributing members of their societies, are Black and brown people, brothers and sisters.
Mhm.
What would be your word of advice for someone that may want to follow in your footsteps, politics or advocacy of their
Mhm.
community members? Even though you
Yeah.
know the work is long and hard,
Yeah.
and it's definitely takes sacrifice, what would be your words of advice?
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me. And to all the people that will listen and hear this podcast, I appreciate you. My advice would be one, follow your passion, it's inside of you. My advice would be to all the women and girls and boys and girls and to everyone that's listening to me, I would say follow your passion. I would say take care of yourself. I am learning to take care of myself. I think in taking care of yourself, you are able to take care of others. I would like to say to everyone who's going through some adversity that you're stronger than the storm you're in. You're so much stronger than the storm that you're in. I would say ask for help and do not be afraid to accept it. No one should have to go through anything all by themselves. I will say to you, if you ever need me, please reach out to me.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Likewise, yes.
Thank you. I would say to people that are thinking of running for office and may say, I'm not running because I don't have enough money or I don't have enough time, I would say run. I would say run because there's a lot of people lining up to help you. I would say run, follow your conviction, and run because the world needs to hear your voice. And we need to be in those positions where we can share the stories of others who are shut out of opportunities. And I'd say,
Mhm.
I will also say, be prepared to be attacked, be prepared to be further marginalized, be prepared to be shut out of opportunities that you're more than qualified for. But do not stop. Do not speak in. Do not stop fighting. Do not stop using your voice. I would say be unafraid, be unapologetic. I would say you have a lot of people that are rooting for you once you step out. I could not do this political work without people supporting me, without my neighbors. I have been up against a lot of systematic structures, both toxic and awful. But I am still standing because I am stronger than the storm that I am in.
Mhm.
And I have strong faith in God. And my Bible tells me, scripture tells me in conclusion, in Jeremiah 29, verse 11, that my best days are ahead of me because
Mhm.
He has awesome, amazing, beautiful, wonderful plans for me, some that I have not even seen as yet, and for my children and generations that will follow. And in my personal motto is, I have no obstacles in my life. I turn all of them into stepping stones. So the obstacles that you may be facing in your life, Black women, Black men, poor white people, you are stronger than all of those obstacles.
Mhm.
Need more people of color in the General Assembly here in Rhode Island. We need more immigrants
Mhm.
General Assembly. We need more Black women and Black men from the struggle, who knows what it is to work for a living wage, who knows
Yes.
what it is to pay student debt, who knows
Yes.
what it is to come home and see an eviction notice on their door,
Mhm.
so they can fight and we can fight for affordable housing. So I would say run. And that would be the last thing I'll say. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. It means the world to me.
Oh no,
So
thank
glad that you gave me this space just to share the work. Thank you.
no, thank you so much. I'm certainly honored, and this is certainly a beautiful ending to which will be close to end soon in terms of Women's History Month, and
Mhm,
just I hope um, once again, I mean, just feeling so honored to be in your presence, and just so
mhm.
much wonderful discussion, and I think
Yes.
also just giving information. I think I think the premise of my podcast was to develop conversations and topics and talk about things that matter to us all. And that certainly
Mhm.
is evident here. And
Thank
also
you.
just the passion and honing in on such the passion of the amazing people that have crossed even virtual
Mhm,
spaces of my
mhm,
life as
mhm.
well as physically. And just really being able to showcase that. And I so appreciate you in your busy schedule setting this time aside to have these discussions about your work. And I hope a lot of people are able to see this and listen to this because I think it just is so resounding. And also to know that there's someone there that gets it and is
Mhm,
that on the front is on the front lines for
mhm,
us in a way that is so caring and so meaningful and will really be such a difference for us and our generations moving forward. So all I can do is thank you, thank you, thank you for that. I certainly hope to continue the conversation. I
yes.
certainly hope to have you back in the future.
Thank
And as mentioned before, this podcast will be found on the Meetup with the Mila YouTube page as well as others. And I so thank our listeners and the people that have supported me with kicking off this podcast. And I certainly, like I said, appreciate everything that you bring to this table in our community, in our state, and also just your warmth and just your ability to just be so many places at once. Jamaica here, all
you.
around. I appreciate your superhero energy, and that does not go unnoticed, unappreciated. And certainly, I like again sending you nothing but love and light your
Thank you
way.
so much.
And I hope to be involved with some of these things that you have coming up in terms of
Yes.
anything I can help in terms of your reelection. And then when you do, again, feel free to come back, especially when it comes to, rallying around some of the organization of resources in Jamaica
Thank
as well
you.
as here.
Thank
I
you.
know that there will be a group that will be more than happy to help, and I'm certainly one of those people. So thank you so much once
Thank
again.
you.
And thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of Meet Up with Mila, where the conversations and topics affect us all. And thank you so much, Representative
Thank
Marcia
you.
Ranglin-Vassell.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye bye.